By now, something in you may have begun to shift. Not suddenly, not with fireworks, but like morning mist lifting from a still lake. The stories ahead are no more complex than those before. They are quiet, patient, and ordinary on the surface. And yet, within their ordinariness, a certain clarity begins to emerge. They will not hand you answers. They do not shout, "This is the truth." Instead, they hold out a small light, just enough to see the next step beneath your feet. There is a different kind of knowing that arises, not from solving, but from sitting. Not from adding, but from emptying. Not from racing forward, but from standing still, long enough to see what's been here all along. These next stories may stir something simple. A question, a silence, a soft inner smile. No need to grasp for meaning. Let it come, or not come. The stories don't mind. They'll sit with you either way. Like a stone beside the path. Like a leaf floating past your window. So take one more breath, and let yourself settle again. We begin, once more, from where we already are. The cup of tea. Too much knowledge can obstruct direct experience. A young man traveled across the sea to study with a Zen master. He had read books, practiced meditation, and believed he was ready for deeper wisdom. When he arrived at the monastery, the master welcomed him quietly, offering no titles, no lectures, just tea. They sat on the floor of the small wooden room. Outside, the wind stirred gently through bamboo. The student sat straight, eager. "Tell me, master," he began. "I've studied many paths. I've read sutras and scriptures. I understand the basics of emptiness, impermanence, and non-attachment. But I want to know more, the real teachings, the hidden truths." The master smiled softly and began pouring tea into the student's cup. The cup filled, then it reached the brim, then it overflowed. Tea spilled onto the tray, then the floor. Still, the master poured. "Master," the student exclaimed, "the cup is full." The master paused. "Exactly," he said. He set the teapot down and looked gently at the student. "Your mind," he said, "is like this cup. So full of knowledge, comparisons, and conclusions that there's no space left for anything new. If you truly wish to understand, first, empty your cup." The room grew quiet. Something inside the student softened. He had come to add more, but now he saw the path was in letting go. The Buddha once said, "To see the way, you must first drop all views." Real wisdom does not come through accumulation, but through spaciousness. Sometimes the mind must grow quiet before it can truly listen. Sometimes the cup must be emptied so it can taste something it never has before. The student bowed deeply, and in that moment, his learning began. The samurai and the gate of heaven and hell. Heaven or hell is created in the mind at the moment of reaction. A fierce samurai once traveled to visit a Zen master. He was a warrior of great power, strong, respected, feared by many. But inside, he carried a restlessness, a question that had followed him through battlefields and into long, silent nights. What are heaven and hell? When he arrived at the monastery, he did not bow. He stood tall, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Monk," he said, "I have come to ask you a question. Tell me, what is the difference between heaven and hell?" The master looked up slowly. Then, without hesitation, he replied, "You? You're nothing but a brute. A soldier who kills for honor? You stink of blood. Your sword is dull, your heart even duller." The samurai's face turned red. His hand trembled. Anger rose like fire through his chest. His grip tightened on the sword. In another breath, he would strike. Just then, the master said softly, "That is hell." The samurai froze. He looked into the monk's eyes, and in that stillness, he saw it. The space between reaction and awareness. The place where choice lives. His hands loosened. His breath deepened. He lowered the sword. "And this," the master said, "is heaven." The Buddha taught, "With our thoughts we create the world." Heaven and hell are not places. They are not waiting beyond death. They arise here, in every moment we meet, with anger or with understanding, with fear or with compassion. The warrior bowed low. For the first time in his life, he had conquered something far greater than any enemy. Ryokan and the Moon. The story of the poor monk and the thief. The poor monk had nothing to lose, yet still offered the moon. Ryokan was a Zen monk known not for sermons, but for silence. Not for doctrine, but for presence. He lived in a simple hut near the edge of the forest. No walls, no locks, no possessions. He spent his days sweeping fallen leaves, writing poems on scraps of rice paper, and sitting with the moonlight as his only company. One evening, while Ryokan was away, a thief crept into the hut. He found nothing to take. No money, no jewels, no gold. Just a mat, a bowl, an old robe, and a wooden pen. Disappointed, the thief turned to leave. Just then, Ryokan returned. He looked at the man, then at his empty hands. Without fear or anger, he smiled. "You've come a long way to visit me," Ryokan said softly. "And you should not leave empty-handed." He reached for the robe he was wearing. Thin, worn, but warm, and gently handed it to the thief. "Please," he said, "take this. It is all I have." The thief stared, speechless. That night, after the thief had gone, Ryokan sat outside his hut. The wind was cool, the stars bright. Looking up at the sky, he whispered, "Ah, if only I could have given him the moon." The Buddha said, "The one who has nothing to protect is the one who cannot be robbed." True wealth is not what we own, but what we no longer need to cling to. Even in the face of loss, Ryokan had offered what he had freely, and in doing so, he kept what mattered most, his peace. Choosing the right boat. There is no single path, only the one that fits you. A young seeker once traveled from monastery to monastery, searching for the right teaching. He studied with many masters, learning meditation, chanting, philosophy, breathwork. Each place he visited taught a different path. Each master claimed their way was best. One said, "Sit in stillness." Another said, "Move like the river." One spoke of emptiness, another of devotion. The seeker became overwhelmed. He began to question everything. Which path is true? He asked himself. What if I choose the wrong boat and never reach the other shore? Eventually, he came upon a Zen master living by a wide, slow-moving river. The seeker bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "I've seen many boats. Some are large, some small. Some go fast. Others are quiet. How do I know which boat will take me to enlightenment?" The master looked at the river, then pointed to the water. "Whichever boat you take," he said, "you must still row." The seeker blinked. The master continued, "You ask about the boat, its shape, its speed, its name. But what matters is not the boat. It's whether you climb in, and whether you paddle with sincerity. There is no perfect boat, he said. There is only the boat you commit to. The Buddha said, there are many paths to the top of the mountain, but the view is the same. You may sit in zazen, you may walk in prayer, you may chant, bow, breathe, or simply listen. All of them are boats. None are magic. All require presence, effort, and letting go. The seeker looked down at his own feet. They were already wet. He smiled, and for the first time, he stepped in. The sound of one hand. Do not seek answers. Experience beyond thought. A young monk once approached his master with a question that had troubled him for days. "Master," he asked, "I've heard of the great Zen koans, riddles that cannot be solved with logic. Will you give me one to meditate on?" The master nodded. "Listen carefully," he said. "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" The monk froze. He waited for the rest of the question, but there was nothing more. "That's it?" he asked. The master smiled. The monk returned to his hut. Day after day, he sat with the question. He clapped one hand against the other. Of course, that made a sound, but one hand alone? He waved it through the air, slapped it against his leg, rubbed it on wood. Still, nothing felt like the answer. Frustrated, he went back to the master. "I can't solve it," he said. "There is no sound, or maybe there is, but I can't hear it." The master looked at him gently. "It's not a puzzle," he said. "It's a mirror. This question is not to be answered, but to empty you of the one who needs to answer it." The monk paused. Something in him let go. He stopped trying to understand. He stopped trying to find. And in that stillness, he began to hear something else. Not a sound, but a silence that held everything. The Buddha said, "The finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. Do not mistake the teaching for the truth." Koans are not teachings. They are doors. They don't open outward. They open inward. And when you no longer need an answer, you may already be inside. You have now walked through the final 5 stories. They spoke of full cups and empty minds, of samurai and stillness, of monks offering the moon, of boats waiting quietly by the riverbank, and of the sound that cannot be heard because it can only be known. These were not answers. They were not maps. They were moments, each pointing not outward, but inward, toward the space behind thought, the breath before words, the pause between all seeking. The Buddha never asked us to become something else. He only asked us to wake up to what has always been here. Peace does not bloom in the future. Wisdom does not arrive when we get it right. Freedom is not earned. It is remembered. Sometimes, the most powerful moment is when you stop trying to arrive and notice you are already here. So if something in you feels softer or quieter or simply still, let that be enough. Thank you for listening with presence. May the stories echo not in your mind, but in your way of seeing, in your way of breathing, in your way of being. There is no next step, only this one.